"Do not touch the child," the guard warned. But the lost cub had already crawled into the arms of the one girl everyone in Silverpine Pack had been taught to despise. Emily Carter was on her knees in the snow behind the pack house, her thin gray dress soaked at the hem, her fingers numb, her pale face lowered beneath the porch lanterns while a dozen wolves watched from the warmth of the steps. "A weak Omega should know her place," Victoria Hale said, her voice smooth enough to sound polite and cruel enough to make the younger maids look away. "The kennels are empty tonight. That is more shelter than you deserve." No one defended Emily. No one ever did. Her wolf had been quiet since childhood, a small fading presence inside her chest, too soft to impress the alphas, too gentle to frighten the servants who stole her meals, too silent to answer when people called her defective. Emily pressed her hands together to stop them from shaking. She would not beg. Begging only made them smile. The winter air cut across the yard, carrying the smell of pine, smoke, and something strange beneath it, something sharp and frightened. Then came the sound. Not a howl, not a growl, a tiny scrape against frozen stone. Emily lifted her head. At the edge of the dark woods, where the trees stood black against the moon, something small moved through the snow. The watching wolves went still. Even Victoria stopped speaking. A cub stumbled into the lantern light, no bigger than a child, with silver gray fur tangled with burrs, one ear bent low, and a black velvet cord hanging loose around its neck. Its golden eyes were too bright for an ordinary pup. Too old, too afraid. The guards drew back as if the little creature carried a curse. "Royal scent," one of them whispered. Nobody moved. But Emily was already moving, not fast, not foolishly, just one hand extended, palm open, voice low as a prayer. "Hey, little wolf. You found a long way to be alone, didn't you?" The cub froze. Its tiny chest fluttered. For one breath, the whole yard waited for it to snap, bolt, or scream. Instead, it crawled straight toward Emily. Not to Victoria in her white fur coat. Not to the beta with the polished boots. Not to the healer holding a silver case. To Emily, the weak Omega. The girl with no rank, no family worth naming, and no power anyone believed in. The cub pushed its cold nose into her palm, then climbed clumsily into her lap and buried its face against her heart. Emily forgot the crowd. She forgot the snow. She wrapped both arms around him and felt him trembling like a secret that had almost been lost forever. "Get it off her," Victoria snapped, fear sharpening her voice. Marcus Reed stepped forward, reaching for Emily's shoulder. The cub's head lifted. Its golden eyes flashed. A low warning rolled from its small throat, soft but unmistakable. The yard fell silent. Marcus stopped with his hand suspended inches from Emily's sleeve. The cub pressed closer to her and bared its tiny teeth at every person around them. Not wild, not wicked, protective. Emily looked down in shock as the black cord around his neck slipped free, revealing a small obsidian crest shaped like a crown beneath a crescent moon. A royal guard went white. His voice broke the silence in a whisper that reached every corner of the yard. "By the moon, that is Caleb Blackwood. That is the Alpha King's lost son." The name Caleb Blackwood changed the air faster than the winter wind. Every wolf in the yard understood what it meant. Royal blood, royal danger, royal punishment if one careless hand frightened the child who belonged to the most powerful alpha in the Northern Territories. The guards backed away first, then the servants, then even the pack elders who had spent years looking through Emily Carter as if she were furniture. No one wanted to be the person who reached for the Alpha King's son and made him cry. No one except Emily, who was not reaching anymore because Caleb had already chosen where he wanted to be. He stayed curled against her chest, small claws caught in the threadbare sleeve of her dress, his silver gray fur cold beneath her fingers. He was shaking so hard she could feel it through her ribs. Not anger, not wildness. Fear. Deep, exhausted fear. Emily lowered her chin until her breath warmed the top of his head. "It is all right," she whispered, though nothing about the yard was all right. Not the staring faces, not the drawn-back hands, not the way Victoria Hale looked at her as if Emily had stolen something priceless simply by being kind. Caleb made a small broken sound and pushed closer. Emily felt the shape of him beneath the tangled fur, too thin for a royal cub, too tired for a child who should have had warm rooms, full meals, and guards posted at every door. Bits of frozen pine needles clung to his coat. One paw was tucked carefully under his body, as if he did not want anyone to notice it hurt. Under the smoke and snow, Emily caught another scent, faint and bitter, like crushed weeds left too close to fire. Her stomach tightened. Wolfenbane. Not enough to take him down. Just enough to keep him terrified, confused, running. "Give him to the healer," Marcus Reed said, his voice low, controlled, and sharp enough to warn her. Emily looked at the healer standing 10 feet away with a silver case clutched in both hands. The man was pale. He would not even meet Caleb's eyes. "He does not want the healer," Emily said softly. "He wants quiet." A few people gasped, not because her words were rude, but because she had spoken at all. Victoria stepped down from the porch, her white coat untouched by snow, her smile gone. "You are a servant, Emily. You do not decide what royal blood wants." She reached as if to peel Caleb from Emily's arms. The cub's head snapped up. The warning in his throat returned, small but clear, and every guard in the yard stiffened. Victoria froze with her hand in the air. Emily did not smile. She did not feel brave. Her heart was beating so hard it hurt. But she shifted her body just enough to shield Caleb from the crowd and wrapped the torn edge of her shawl around him. "Please," she said, not to Victoria, not to Marcus, but to everyone. "He has been alone in the cold. Let him breathe." For 3 seconds, the only sound was Caleb's uneven breathing against her collarbone. Then a horn cried out from beyond the iron gates, long and low, shaking the snow from the black pine branches. Once, twice, a third time, the royal call. The guards turned toward the forest road as shadows moved between the trees. White wolves stepped into the lantern glow, huge and silent, their eyes fixed on the child in Emily's arms. Behind them came a black carriage marked with the same crescent crown hanging at Caleb's throat. The entire pack dropped to one knee. Emily remained in the snow because Caleb would not let her move. The carriage door opened. A tall man in a dark coat stepped down, his presence pressing over the yard like a storm held behind glass. Alpha King Nathaniel Blackwood had found his son at last, and his son was clinging to the lowest Omega in Silverpine as if she were the only safe place left in the world. Nathaniel Blackwood did not run. That was the first thing Emily noticed, and somehow it frightened her more than if he had crossed the yard in a panic. The Alpha King stepped down from the carriage with the stillness of a man who had taught every part of himself to obey before it broke. Snow gathered on the shoulders of his black coat. His pale face revealed nothing. Only his eyes betrayed him, bright gold at the edges as they locked on the small cub trembling in Emily Carter's arms. Caleb made a sound so soft it barely reached the porch, but Nathaniel heard it. Every royal wolf heard it. The entire yard seemed to bow beneath the weight of that single broken breath. Emily felt the cub stiffen against her. His claws caught tighter in her sleeve, not hard enough to harm her, but desperate enough to make the fabric pull. Nathaniel took one step forward. Caleb flinched. The Alpha King stopped. Something moved across his face and vanished before anyone could name it. Pain, maybe, or guilt, or the terrible restraint of a father who could not fall apart while 100 eyes were watching. Marcus Reed bent his head. "Your Majesty, we found the prince in the Omega's possession." The words struck the yard like ice dropped into still water. In her possession, not in her arms, not safe against her heart, not alive because she had not backed away. Emily looked up, stunned, but Marcus would not meet her eyes. Victoria stood just behind him, quiet now, watching Nathaniel with a careful expression that seemed almost kind until Emily saw the satisfaction hidden beneath it. Nathaniel's gaze shifted to Emily. The full force of it made her lungs tighten. He was not shouting. He did not need to. His silence carried more command than any raised voice in Silverpine. "What is your name?" he asked. "Emily Carter," she answered, though her voice came out thin from the cold. "Emily Carter," he repeated, as if weighing whether the name belonged on a witness list or a sentence. "Why is my son holding on to you?" Emily looked down at Caleb, whose little face had pressed back into her shawl. "I do not know." That was the truth, and it sounded useless. Murmurs stirred across the yard. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "Give him to me." The command rolled through the snow, low and absolute. Several Omegas lowered their heads at once. Emily's body wanted to obey. Her wolf, small and frightened, folded deeper inside her. But Caleb's breathing changed the moment Nathaniel spoke. It came too fast, too shallow, catching in his tiny chest like he was back in whatever dark place had taught him to be afraid. Emily felt his panic before anyone else saw it. She held him closer, not to defy a king, but to keep a child from shattering. The royal guards moved. Their boots crunched over frozen ground. Caleb whimpered. Nathaniel's golden stare sharpened. I said give him to me. Emily's heart slammed once, hard enough to hurt. She lifted her eyes to the most dangerous man in the Northern Territories and whispered, Stop. You are scaring him. The yard went silent so completely that even the wind seemed to pull away from the trees. Victoria's mouth parted. Marcus looked at Emily as if she had chosen to step off a cliff. No one corrected the Alpha King. No one, especially not a weak Omega with snow on her knees and a torn shawl around a royal heir. Nathaniel did not move. His eyes dropped from Emily's face to Caleb's trembling body, then to the cub's little paws locked in her sleeve. Emily lowered her voice, turning her attention back to the child. Breathe, little wolf. Just breathe. You are not alone now. She did not use magic. She did not know any. She only softened every word until it became warmer than the winter air. Caleb listened. One breath, then another. His grip loosened just enough for Emily to feel the change. Nathaniel saw it too. For the first time since he had stepped from the carriage, the Alpha King looked less like a ruler and more like a man standing outside a door his own son would not open. He took a slow breath, and the crushing pressure in the yard eased by a fraction. Caleb stopped shaking. Not completely, but enough. Enough for every royal guard to see. Enough for every servant who had laughed at Emily to look away in confusion. Nathaniel turned his head toward Marcus without taking his eyes off her. Prepare the carriage. Marcus hesitated. Your Majesty? Nathaniel's voice dropped colder than the snow. My son will return to Obsidian Hall. Then his gaze settled on Emily again, unreadable and dangerous. And the Omega comes with us. Obsidian Hall rose from the mountain like a crown carved out of midnight, all black stone, silver windows, and towers sharp enough to cut the moonlight. Emily had never seen anything so beautiful or so unforgiving. The royal carriage passed through 3 iron gates before stopping beneath an archway guarded by white wolves twice the size of any she had known in Silverpine. Caleb stayed pressed against her the entire ride, his small body wrapped in her torn shawl, his breathing uneven but calmer whenever her hand moved gently over his back. No one spoke to her. Not the guards. Not Marcus Reed. Not even Nathaniel Blackwood, who sat across from her in terrible stillness, watching his son cling to a girl who should have meant nothing. Inside the palace, the air smelled of polished wood, cold marble, and old power. Servants froze when they saw Emily step onto the black floor with snow melting from her dress and the royal heir in her arms. Their eyes moved from Caleb to her bare, reddened hands, then away again as if looking too long might make them guilty of something. A royal healer hurried forward with a leather case and a silver badge pinned to his coat. The moment he came within 3 steps, Caleb's little body locked tight. Emily felt it before the sound came, the quick hitch in his chest, the tiny breath that could not find its way out. Wait, she whispered. The healer stopped, offended. He needs a full examination. He needs you to lower your voice. The words left Emily before fear could swallow them. The hall went still. Nathaniel's gaze cut to her, sharp as winter glass, but Emily did not look away from Caleb. She only shifted him higher against her shoulder and murmured, Easy, little wolf. No one is taking you. The cub's breathing loosened. 1 breath. 2. The healer stared as if she had performed a miracle instead of noticing a frightened child. They moved Caleb to the royal nursery, a vast room with carved wooden animals, navy curtains, and a fireplace big enough to warm a cottage. Yet the child trembled harder there than he had in the snow. When a guard guided Emily back toward the door, Caleb made a small strangled sound and reached for her with both hands. Nathaniel ordered the guard to stop. His expression did not change, but something in the room shifted, like a blade turning toward a new enemy. What did you do to him? He asked. Emily stood 3 steps from the bed, arms empty and aching. I did nothing. My son has refused his healers, his guards, and his own bloodline, Nathaniel said quietly. But he reaches for you. Emily swallowed. The truth sounded too small for a room this grand. Maybe I was the first person who did not reach for him like he was a problem. The healer drew in a breath. Marcus looked down. Nathaniel said nothing. Emily moved closer only when Caleb whimpered again. That was when she noticed it. Each time the healer opened his silver instruments, Caleb's eyes darted to the shine and his pulse jumped. Each time a guard's metal clasp struck the marble, his whole body flinched. And beneath the clean palace scents, beneath smoke and cedar and royal blood, Emily caught something soft and wrong drifting from the hallway. White flowers. Sweet. Powdery. Familiar to Caleb in a way that made terror bloom under his skin. Emily turned her head as Victoria Hale entered the nursery, now dressed in pale silk, her smile gentle enough to fool anyone who wanted comfort more than truth. The scent clung to her coat. Caleb saw her and pulled the blanket over his face. Nathaniel noticed. For the first time, the Alpha King looked truly shaken. That scent, Emily whispered. He knows it. Nathaniel's face lost the last of its color. Caleb's mother wore white gardenia. The room seemed to lose heat. She has been gone for 2 years. No one moved. No one breathed. Later, when the palace quieted and the fire burned low, Caleb opened his golden eyes in the dark. His tiny fingers caught Emily's sleeve. His voice came out rough, barely more than air, but every word landed like a warning. Hide. Emily did not sleep after Caleb whispered that single word. Hide. It stayed in the nursery like a second shadow, colder than the stone floor beneath her feet, sharper than the wind pressing against the tall, silver windows. The royal guards outside the door spoke in low voices, their armor clicking softly whenever they shifted, but Caleb heard every sound. Each scrape made his small shoulders tense beneath the navy blanket. Each distant footstep pulled his golden eyes toward the dark corners of the room. Emily sat beside the bed in a straight-back chair too fine for someone like her, one hand resting near him but not trapping him, close enough that he could reach her if the fear came back. Near dawn, when the fireplace had burned down to red coals, Caleb slipped from the covers and touched her wrist with 2 tiny fingers. He did not speak again. Instead, he pointed to the polished floor. Emily understood without knowing how. She handed him a piece of charcoal from the hearth, and he crouched on the marble, still wrapped in her shawl, drawing with careful, trembling strokes. First came a crown, then a flower with 5 pale petals, then a thin line that looked like a blade, not drawn as a weapon in a child's hand, but as something he had seen and could not forget. Emily's breath caught. The crown could mean the court. The flower meant Victoria's gardenia scent. The final mark meant danger hidden close enough for a child to recognize it. Caleb tapped the flower twice, then pressed both hands over his ears. Not lost, Emily thought, her skin prickling. He had not wandered away. He had run from someone inside the palace. The nursery door opened before she could move. Nathaniel. Blackwood stepped inside with Marcus Reed at his shoulder, both men going still at the sight of Emily kneeling beside Caleb on the floor. Instinct moved faster than thought. Emily pulled the edge of the blanket over the charcoal marks, not to deceive the king, but to protect the child until she understood whom he was afraid of. Nathaniel saw the movement. His eyes narrowed. What are you hiding? Emily rose slowly, keeping herself between Caleb and the doorway. A frightened child's trust. It was a dangerous answer. Marcus's expression hardened. Nathaniel's did not change, but the room seemed to tighten around his silence. Before he could speak, another scent drifted through the doorway, soft and sweet, gardenia under powdered silk. Caleb whimpered once and ducked behind Emily's skirt. Victoria Hale entered as if she belonged in every royal room she crossed, her pale coat folded over one arm, her smile gentle for Nathaniel and poisonous only where Emily could see it. Your Majesty, she said, lowering her head with perfect grace. The council is concerned. Allowing a servant Omega to remain beside the heir may encourage an unhealthy attachment. Emily felt Caleb's fingers twist into her dress. Victoria turned toward the bed, her voice softening into something almost musical. Prince Caleb, sweetheart, you do not need to hide behind her. She stepped closer. Caleb shook his head. Emily moved half an inch in front of him. Victoria's eyes flashed. Know your place. I do, Emily said quietly. Right now it is here. The words surprised even her. The room froze. Victoria reached down as if to take Caleb's hand. Caleb jerked back, and in the quick movement his fingers caught the edge of Victoria's glove. The delicate seam split. A faint, bitter scent slipped into the air beneath the gardenia, green and burning, almost hidden but not gone. Wolfenbane. Emily looked at the torn glove, then at Caleb, then at the king. Nathaniel had smelled it too. His golden eyes lifted to Victoria's face, no longer cold, no longer unreadable, but dangerously awake. Victoria withdrew her hand too slowly. Children imagine things after trauma, she said. Emily's voice was barely above a whisper. Then why does your glove smell like the thing that made him run? For one suspended moment, no one in the nursery moved. Victoria's torn glove rested against her pale wrist, the hidden scent of wolfsbane threading through the warm air like a secret finally taking shape. Nathaniel Blackwood stepped forward, and the force of his attention made every flame in the fireplace seem smaller. Victoria's smile trembled only once before she lowered her hand behind the fold of her coat. Your Majesty, she said, soft and wounded, I would never endanger your son. Caleb whimpered behind Emily, and that sound mattered more than every polished word Victoria could offer. Marcus Reed moved quickly then, too quickly for a man who claimed to be only observing. The council should review this before accusations are made, he said. The child is fragile. The Omega is emotional. We cannot let fear become testimony. Emily felt the trap closing. She was the weakest person in the room, the easiest one to doubt, the easiest one to remove. Then the nursery lanterns flickered. A thin glass vial rolled from beneath the edge of the bed, no larger than Emily's thumb, its stopper loosened, its contents invisible but potent enough to change the air. The gardenia scent bloomed too sweet, too strong, wrapping around the bitter green note beneath it. Caleb's body went rigid. His small hands flew to his throat as his breath caught in short, broken pulse. The healer rushed forward. Caleb recoiled so hard the blanket tangled around his legs. Nathaniel's control cracked at the edges, his alpha aura spilling into the room like a thunderstorm trapped inside stone walls. The windows shivered. The servants in the hall dropped their eyes. Even Marcus took a step back. But the pressure made Caleb struggle more. Pull it back, Emily said. Her voice was thin, but it cut through the panic. Nathaniel turned on her, golden-eyed and terrible. Emily should have lowered her head. She did not. Your fear is filling the room. He cannot breathe under it. Silence hit hard. Then, slowly, impossibly, the Alpha King closed his eyes and drew the storm inward. Emily crossed the room before anyone could stop her. She knelt beside Caleb, ignoring the healer's shocked protest, and placed one hand lightly over the center of his chest, not pressing, not forcing, only steadying. His skin was cold beneath her palm. His eyes searched her face as if she were the last lantern left in a dark forest. Stay with me, little wolf, she whispered. Follow my voice. She did not know why the melody came. It rose from somewhere deeper than memory, older than fear, a lullaby with no words at first, only a low, trembling hum that softened the edges of the room. The sound moved through Emily's chest and into her hand. Silver light flickered beneath her skin, faint as moonlight underwater. The healer stopped breathing. Marcus went still. Victoria's face emptied of color. Caleb's chest lifted once. Then again. The terrible tightness eased, and his small fingers curled around Emily's wrist as if anchoring himself to the song. The hum became words Emily had never learned. Gentle syllables that tasted like snow, cedar, and starlight. Caleb exhaled, long and shaky, then leaned into her until his forehead touched her shoulder. The silver glow gathered at Emily's wrist, forming the shape of a crescent moon no larger than a dime. Nathaniel saw it. Everyone saw it. The mark brightened once, and in that brief light the carved wolves along the nursery walls seemed to bow their wooden heads. Emily stared at her own skin, shaken to the bone. She had spent her life being told there was nothing ancient or powerful inside her, nothing worth naming, nothing a pack could value. Yet Caleb was breathing because of a song her mouth had known before her mind did. Nathaniel stepped closer, no longer looking at her like a suspect, no longer looking at her like a servant dragged from the snow. His voice came low, careful, almost reverent. Emily Carter, he said, what are you? The question did not have time to become an answer. Before Emily could speak, the nursery doors opened and 3 council elders entered in dark ceremonial coats, their faces arranged into the kind of calm that never meant mercy. Thomas Greer walked at the center, silver hair combed neatly back, one hand resting on the carved head of his cane. His eyes went first to Caleb sleeping against Emily's side, then to the crescent mark still glowing faintly on her wrist. He did not look surprised. That frightened her more than anger would have. "Your Majesty," Greer said, bowing just enough to honor the crown and not enough to surrender power. "By emergency authority of the High Council, the Omega must be removed from the royal heir until her influence is examined." Caleb stirred immediately, as if the words themselves had touched some hidden bruise inside his memory. Emily held still. Nathaniel stepped between her and the council, broad-shouldered and silent, but Marcus Reed moved to Greer's side with a sealed packet in his hand. "Evidence was recovered from the northern road," Marcus said. "A strip of gray cloth matching Miss Carter's dress was found near the abandoned carriage route. There are also witnesses in Silverpine who say the cub went directly to her, as if trained." Emily felt the room tilt. "That is not true." Her voice was quiet, but it carried. "I never saw him before tonight." Victoria stood behind the council, her torn glove replaced, her gardenia scent softened but not gone. She lowered her eyes in practiced sorrow. "No one wants to blame a servant girl unfairly," she said. "But ancient marks, forbidden lullabies, and a child who refuses his own father are not ordinary things." Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "Careful." One word. The room cooled. Greer did not flinch. "The kingdom cannot be ruled by a grieving father's hope. If the heir has been enchanted, every hour beside her deepens the danger. If you defend her without inquiry, the court will say she has reached you as well." Emily saw the trap then. Not around her. Around Nathaniel. If he protected her too quickly, they would call him compromised. If he let them take her, Caleb would wake alone with the very people he feared. The choice was cruel because it had been built that way. A pair of guards approached with pale silver cuffs lined in velvet, made to restrain without leaving marks and still cold enough to make Emily's wolf retreat into silence. Caleb's eyes opened. Panic rushed through him, so suddenly Emily felt it in her own chest. "No," he whispered, a small broken sound that made Nathaniel turn. Emily bent close before the guards reached her. "Listen to me, little wolf. You breathe like we practiced. You stay awake. You watch who smiles when I am gone." Caleb clutched her sleeve, but Emily gently eased his fingers free. It was the hardest thing she had ever done. The cuffs closed around her wrists with a soft click. Nathaniel watched, golden eyes burning with a restraint that looked more painful than rage. "This is not over," he said. Greer answered. "It will be decided before the full court at moonrise." By sunset, Emily stood alone in the Hall of Crowns beneath a ceiling painted with wolves and stars. Nobles filled the marble benches. Silverpine servants stood at the back, whispering behind gloved hands. Victoria sat near the council, pure and pale as fresh snow. Marcus presented the false cloth. Greer named her a threat to succession, a possible enchantress, a lowborn Omega who had placed herself between a prince and the throne. Emily's knees trembled, but she did not bow her head. Somewhere far above, behind locked nursery doors, Caleb began to cry. The sound did not fade. It grew. A thin crack ran through the courtroom silence. Then the great doors shuddered on their hinges, and a young royal voice rang through the hall with impossible clarity. "Let her go." The doors burst open not with splintering force, but with the terrible authority of a command no lock in Obsidian Hall dared refuse. Caleb Blackwood stood between two royal wolves, small beneath the towering archway, wrapped in the navy blanket from his nursery, his silver-gray hair damp at the temples, his golden eyes fixed only on Emily. Behind him, more wolves filled the corridor, silent as snowfall, their white coats glowing beneath the moonlit windows. No one spoke. No one even breathed. The prince, who had not crossed a crowded room without terror since the ambush, had crossed half the palace to reach the one person the council wanted condemned. Emily's silver cuffs felt colder around her wrists. "Caleb," Nathaniel said, his voice low, not a command this time, but a father's careful plea. Caleb did not go to him. He walked past the nobles, past the guards, past Victoria Hale in her pale gown, and stopped in front of Emily. Then he turned around and placed himself between her and the court. He was so small that the sight should have been heartbreaking. Instead, it was frightening in a way no crown could be. Royal blood had chosen a side. Greer rose from his council seat, his cane striking the marble once. Remove the child. He is under influence. Caleb lifted his chin. His voice shook, but it carried to every corner of the hall. Do not touch her. The words fell like a bell through the room. Emily's breath caught. From the windows, a low sound answered. Not a growl, not a threat, but the deep, unified rumble of the royal wolves outside the palace walls. One by one, the wolves in the hall lowered their heads. The nobles stared in disbelief. Silverpine's servants at the back went pale. Victoria's perfect expression cracked. Emily sank carefully to her knees despite the cuffs burning cold against her skin. Caleb, she whispered, breathe with me. He looked back at her, and for a moment the court vanished. There was only a frightened child and the voice he trusted. Emily began the lullaby again. Soft, wordless at first. The melody trembled, then steadied, flowing through the marble chamber like moonlight through dark water. The crescent mark on her wrist brightened beneath the silver restraint. The cuffs gave a sharp cold flash, but Emily did not stop. Caleb's breathing slowed. The royal wolves bowed lower. The painted stars on the ceiling seemed to wake in the pale glow. Nathaniel stood very still, watching the court witness what he had already begun to understand. Emily was not holding power over his son. She was giving his son back to himself. The light from her mark spread across the floor in a thin silver circle, and as it touched Caleb's paws, the hidden scents in the room sharpened. Gardenia, bitter wolfsbane, polished leather, fear. Caleb turned suddenly toward Victoria. He walked to her before anyone could stop him and touched the edge of her sleeve with one small hand. The fabric shimmered where the silver light reached it, revealing dark stains hidden beneath. Perfume and powder. The bitter scent filled the court. Gasps rose from the benches. Victoria stepped back. This is a trick, she said, but her voice had lost its music. Caleb pointed to Marcus Reed next. The royal wolves near the doorway shifted as one, blocking his path before he could move toward the side exit. Nathaniel's gaze cut to his beta, cold and absolute. Marcus lowered his eyes too late. Greer's cane slipped slightly against the marble. The court understood before anyone declared it. The child had not been enchanted. He had been afraid of the people now standing exposed beneath Emily's light. Nathaniel descended from the throne, each step echoing through the silent hall. He stopped beside Emily, not above her, not across from her, but beside her. With one careful motion, he broke the silver cuffs from her wrists and let them fall to the marble. Then the Alpha King turned to the full court with Caleb pressed safely against Emily's side. This woman is not the threat to my son, he said. She is the reason he is standing here. Nathaniel's declaration did not echo like a shout. It settled over the Hall of Crowns with the weight of law, heavier than every council seal, older than every painted star above them. For a moment, no one dared move. Emily stood beside him with her wrists freed, pale marks left by the silver fading under the soft glow of the crescent on her skin. Caleb leaned into her side, one small hand locked around the torn sleeve everyone had once mocked, and the royal wolves remained bowed around the chamber as if the lowest omega in Silverpine had become something the old world itself remembered. Thomas Greer tried to rise with dignity, but his face had gone the color of ashes. Your Majesty, the council requires procedure. Nathaniel turned his head slowly. The council required silence while my son was hunted inside my own walls. The words were calm. That made them worse. Greer lowered his gaze. Marcus Reed was taken away by royal guards without a single dramatic plea, his polished loyalty stripped down to fear in the space of one breath. Victoria Hale stood frozen near the benches, the gardenia scent around her no longer elegant. Only false. When Nathaniel ordered her title removed, the moonstone pin of a Luna candidate was lifted from her gown, and the nobles who had once admired her looked away as if they had never known her name. Emily watched all of it with a strange ache in her chest. She had imagined justice would feel like fire. Instead, it felt like snow finally stopping after a night that had lasted her whole life. At the back of the hall, the Silverpine servants and elders knelt because the royal wolves were still kneeling, and no one wanted to be the last person standing against what Caleb had chosen. Victoria's eyes found Emily one final time, waiting for triumph, cruelty, revenge, anything sharp enough to make Emily resemble the world that had hurt her. Emily gave her none of it. She only lowered herself to Caleb's height and smoothed the blanket around his shoulders. You were very brave, she whispered. Caleb pressed his forehead to hers, tired at last. You came back, he said. Emily's throat tightened. You asked me to stay? Nathaniel looked down at them, and for the first time since the black carriage had arrived at Silverpine, the terrible distance in his face softened. Not into romance. Not yet. Into recognition. Into respect. Into the quiet grief of a father who had nearly lost everything and found the answer in the arms of a girl his kingdom had been trained not to see. He removed his royal cloak, black wool lined with silver, and placed it over Emily's shoulders. The hall drew in one breath. The cloak was not a proposal. It was not a crown. It was protection, public and undeniable. From this night forward, Nathaniel said, his voice carrying to the highest balcony, Emily Carter is under royal protection. No pack, no council, no noble house will question her place beside my son. Caleb tightened his grip on her hand, as if adding his own command. Outside the windows, dawn began to pale the mountains. Snow drifted over the dark roofs of Obsidian Hall, softer now, no longer a storm but a blessing. The great doors opened, and the royal wolves parted into two white lines leading toward the eastern terrace. Emily walked between them with Caleb in her arms and Nathaniel at her side. She did not walk like a queen. She walked like a girl who had carried fear through the night and refused to let it harden her heart. Behind her, the old court watched in silence. Before her, the sky warmed gold